it's absolutely damning for the boosters. The evidence I've got now is that no one should have been boosted. There is no age group or risk group that benefit from the booster, and no one should be boosted in the future. So, just to give your viewers a few snippets. So, the study itself is the effectiveness of the booster. So it says how many people would have of each age group and risk category would have to have the booster to stop one serious hospitalisation. So, if we look at the 40 to 49-year-olds, Richard, you need to boost with the mRNA experimental vaccine 932,500 people to prevent one serious hospitalisation with COVID.
So nearly 1,000 people to stop one.
No, nearly a million.
Sorry, nearly a million. Sorry,
932,500.
Oh, 900. Yes, sorry. No, so nearly a million people.
Nearly a million people. And bear in mind that we know from Pfizer's own research data that 1 in 800 will have a very serious adverse reaction to the booster. 1 in 800.
Yes.
And all the evidence is that the Moderna is actually worse than the Pfizer. So what you're saying is that to prevent one person being hospitalised with a serious infection from COVID, you're going to damage 1,166 people who'll end up in hospital. And if you look at that, now they're healthy 40 to 49-year-olds. If you look at the high risk 40 to 49-year-olds, you have to vaccinate with the booster 49,800 of them, and that would give you 62 serious adverse events to keep one person out of hospital with a serious infection of COVID. And if we then move on to our age group, unfortunately, 50 to 59-year-olds, who are still now recommended to have the booster, aren't we? We're still recommending to have the booster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I get the text
even
messages.
after all my campaigning. Well, have a copy of these figures. These are the government's own figures. They're available on their website. Anyone can analyse them. We'd have to boost 256,400 healthy 50 to 59-year-olds to stop one serious hospitalisation with COVID. So that will give you 1 in 800, and there's a lot of evidence now that it's the incident of serious harm is more than 1 in 800 because the Pfizer only followed the people who were vaccinated for 8 weeks. So anything that happened to them after 8 weeks, they didn't pick it up.
No.
So it's at least 1 in 800. That means at least 320 people will be hospitalised because of the vaccine, and some of them will die, sadly, to prevent one person being seriously hospitalised with COVID. Well, none of this makes sense, Richard. The only age group where it's not detrimental is the most at risk, which is the over 70s, not the healthy over 70s, but the over 70s with other comorbidities, so that the highest risk group.
Yes.
Where you have to vaccinate with the booster 1 in 800 to save one from going to hospital with a serious event. But that's exactly the same risk as from the vaccine itself. So all they're doing is swapping the risk from COVID for risk from the vaccine. And I think I would suggest to the vulnerable over 70s, if they thought it was prevalent in the area, maybe stopping in for a couple of days or avoiding a lot of personal contact is probably a safer way of reducing their risk than having the booster.
And so experimental medical treatment.
Exactly. So on the government's own figures, which are on their website now, which were released mysteriously on Thursday or quietly, and no one wants to talk about them, there is no evidence that no one should have ever had a booster, and nobody should be having a booster in the future. And I'm going to be going to Parliament next week, armed with this information, to follow up on last week, and I'm going to press the government and hold them to account. Now, what's also equally damning, Richard, is that the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, they actually had this data on the 25th of October last year, and they've sat on it for 3 months. Now, that makes me ask the question, since this data has been with the government all that time, why did the MHRA, the Medicines and Health Care Products Regulatory Agency, why did they recommend at the end of November, knowing all of this, that the vaccine should be extended to the under 5s?
That is a very good question.
Where I've calculated, and it's probably a massive underestimation, that the risk to those babies is at least 200 times more from taking the vaccine than from COVID.